Welcome to week 2. I hope week 1 got off to a good start for you. So I've got just a few things to kind of work through this morning, and then we'll talk more about what lab is going to be like on Wednesday. So first things first, I really want to hear from you guys. So I've got a couple poll everywhere questions for you. So let me put that link into the chat so you can copy and paste it into a browser. Here we go. Okay, there's that link in the chat. I've got a series of poll everywhere questions for you. So we're gonna do all of those first. But I really just want to know, first of all, how week 1 went for you, and not just this class, but all your classes. All right, I'll share my screen. That way we can all look at the results together. Go. All right. So we've got 1 or 2 people that just came in. If you guys are just joining us, I just dropped a link to the chat for some poll everywhere questions. First question is just, how did week 1 go for you? So smooth, better than expected, good, pretty good. Oh, easy to transition back. It felt like week 10. Oh no, that must mean that it must have been a little bit of a heavy lift. Okay, quite a bit of work. Good. Yeah, trying to establish those routines is hard the first couple of weeks, but man, if you can make an honest effort of getting a routine down and following it, that will be a lifesaver around week 8. Training for work at the same time. Yeah, I know a lot of you guys are working at the same time, and I love that. I think that's awesome because it really teaches you time management, and it's also hopefully going to put some money in your pocket, which is always good. So, well, excellent. Well, thank you for that feedback, guys. I've got one more or a couple more questions for you. So here's our next one. There we go. So now that we have really been through kind of an introduction to rangeland management, my question for you is, in one word or phrase, what is an area of range management that you are interested in learning more about this semester? Ooh, balance. Okay. What does balance mean?
Kind of just how like every component like intertwines with each other, like how they all balance with one another.
Okay, great. Yeah, kind of the whole systems approach. So every component is important, but we don't necessarily do a great job balancing for the good of all of them. And that's a big issue in range management. So we're gonna talk about this concept called multiple use in the next couple of weeks. And we're actually really seeing some multiple use issues with the wildfires happening right now. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a little bit. I spent most of last week in meetings with the California Cattlemen's Association. And so we talked a lot about strategy to help encourage proper management of forests to decrease wildfire. All right, interactions, animals and habitat. Cool. Forests. Balance, palatability. Okay, cool. We're going to talk about palatability of feed that's produced on rangeland a little bit from the aspect of wildlife species and from our domestic grazers as well. All right, we're going to give it just one more minute here. We've got a couple people coming in, and I want to make sure to get a good synopsis. That's why I made this a word cloud to see where our common interests were and stuff. And now it really looks like everybody has a bunch of variety of what they want to learn this semester, which is good. It'll make for an interesting one. All right, so again, if you guys are just coming in to the Zoom room, welcome to week 2. In the chat, you will find a link to the poll everywhere questions. And the question that's activated right now is, in one word, what is an area of range management that you're interested in learning more about this semester? So excellent. Everything is good. So yeah, that's good. All right, improving habitat, animals, interaction, forests. Cool. What aspect of forests are you interested in? And you guys can be active. You can either talk to me, which I love. You can put it in the chat, whatever you would like. So forest is kind of it's a really interesting ecosystem. We'll talk a little bit about it in this class. We're going to mostly stick to grasslands and chaparral in this class, and we'll go through what each one of those are. But the forest component, I can bring in certain aspects of it. So just if you would just give me a little bit more specificity on what forest meant. Okay, well, I guess we've got everybody that wants to participate here. So this is good. I'm going to save this and we are going to go to our next question. All right, so let's see here. Next question. So what components below are part of the ecological cycle? So now that you guys have been through the week 1 material and introduction to rangelands, we talked a lot about the ecological cycle, and there was a cool graphic on like the 3rd or the 4th slide last week. So you can go in, and this is a multiple selection question. So what components are part of the ecological cycle that are listed below here? All right, and I'm going to hold off on showing responses until everybody gets in. So let's see, we've got 21 in class, so I'm looking for 21 results. All right, I'm just gonna go about 30 more seconds, guys, so that everybody has a chance to get their answers in for this. All right, 10 more seconds. All righty, here we go. So if we look at responses, we've got some variety here. All right, so good. So lots of people think soil and animal waste are absolutely a part of the ecological cycle. And a handful of people think sunlight and oceans are as well. So the answer to this is that actually all of these components are part of the ecological cycle. And so if we go back to, let me see if I can get it pulled up real quick. Maybe. Sorry, give me just a second. Here we go. All right, so if you guys recall this slide from last week's lecture, when we introduced the concept of rangeland ecology, this figure actually gives you a really good overall aspect to the different components that are part of this ecological cycle. And so when it comes to the definition of rangeland ecology, it's really the study of every component and how they interact with one another. So the sunlight is going to be a part of that. The oceans are going to be a big part of that, especially for us here in California, because a lot of our storm systems come off of the Pacific Ocean from the west. And so that really generates the precipitation, or a large percentage of the precipitation that we see here in California. The air is absolutely a big part of this. So right now we're having a lot of discussions, and there's a lot of controversy and worry about greenhouse gases, right? So you guys have probably heard some of that controversy, but these are going to be gases that are part of what we consider the bigger air component, right? And so we're looking specifically at methane, which is a big issue. There's other gases out there as well, but the methane component, as well as the nitrogen component, are really big players within rangeland management. And so we have the power to produce them. We also have the power to sequester them. And so we're going to talk a little bit about those greenhouse gases this semester as well, in addition to climate change. And so when we see, other components that aren't necessarily range related, like emissions from transportation, so all the trucks running up and down the road, auto factories, fossil fuel factories, refineries, all of that good stuff. Those are all dealing with material that is going to be a part of that ecological cycle as well. And so we're going to spend a lot of time talking about all of these components. And so just to get back to this question here, what components below are a part of the ecological cycle? The answer was all of them. All right, so just so everybody is on the same page. So do you guys have any questions or comments, even if something sparked your interest about this list of components here? All right. Okay, so we've got, I think, one more question for you guys. I will go ahead and grab that one right now, and then we'll get into a discussion more about the class. So, all right. So our last question here is, what percent of California's acreage is considered rangeland? Right, about 20 more seconds here, guys. All right, here we go. Okay, so about 50% is what the majority of the class says, and that is correct. So about 50% of the total acreage in California, California's got about 100 million acres. About 50 million of those acres are considered rangeland. So, and there's different definitions of what rangeland is out there, but in terms of what the federal land management agencies define rangeland as well as the kind of the rangeland sector here in California, that number is about 50%. So, all right, great. Well, thank you guys for participating in that poll. We're going to do these pretty often in class, both in lab and in the lecture portion. So, okay, what I would like to do now is we're going to switch gears and just talk through Blackboard a little bit. And then to make sure that we're all on the same page. And then I have just a short activity for us to get through before the end of class. So. All right, so hopefully you guys are looking at the Blackboard page, and this is in student views. And if you're not, just let me know. So I've got multiple screens going on here. So we are in week 2 this week. And so within week 2, the only folder that you guys have right now is lecture. So the lab folder will be coming on Wednesday when we do lab. And so at this point in time, the only thing that you guys have due this Friday is the quiz for about rangeland history. So you've got a note guide that is set up very similar to last week. So it's partial notes for you guys to use or not use, whatever you would like. And then you've got, I think 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 videos that range from anywhere 8 to about 15 minutes in length about rangeland history. And so those are going to be what you work through this week. And then the quiz is all about rangeland history, and that is due on Friday night by 11:59 p.m. And so that is what we have as far as material that is due this week. Any questions about that? Did anybody have any issues last week with due dates or the quiz not working correctly or any of that? I would like some feedback on Blackboard last week.
AC, I actually did, and I think I emailed you, but then I didn't see the discussion board on the side to do the post that you had mentioned.
Okay. Okay,
the
so
tab isn't there.
Yeah, so Lisa, on that, if you can get it in before 11:59 p.m. tonight, you'll still get like 70% of the points.
Okay.
Yep. So the discussion board is something that we're going to go more in depth with on lab this week too. So what did you guys think about that podcast in general?
I thought it was really interesting. Even though I don't study wildfires necessarily in ecology, I still really like to learn about them because there's a lot, everyone's affected. So learning about it and understanding how they're beneficial, bad things that happen to anyone and everyone with the wildfires, their necessity, their management, just kind of like everything. It all really ties together. So it was really interesting to further elaborate on that topic.
Excellent. Great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Other comments?
I thought it was cool to hear how like the other things, not just in California that's going on, but the things of like outside, you know, in the other countries and everything. Cause I don't know, I felt like we were very focused on California, like since it's actually happening to us. So it's kind of cool to hear what is going on outside that's around us, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. The US, let me try to put this as delicately as possible. The US news and media system is very self-involved, right? So we only hear about stuff that is happening in this country. And it seems like that is even more of an issue after the election last year. And so it's crazy, but have you guys heard about this? Let me see if I can pull it up and then I'll share the screen with you. Yeah, let's do this. So I didn't even know about this until I was in a meeting with my realtor who I go to church with, and he asked me about this. But like, there's more than 1 million acres of Siberian rangeland or Siberian ecosystems that is on fire in Russia right now. It's crazy. And so they are experiencing massive wildfires there too. And so some of these pictures are from last year, but they also have new fires happening this year as well. But it looks very similar to ours, right? Like their forest looks very similar to ours. They're seeing crown to crown spread, or what we also call overstory spread, which is what we're also seeing. But there's a significant percentage of Russia that has burned in the last 2 years as well. It's pretty crazy. And it is as devastating as what we're seeing here. So you can see this burned area. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. There we go. You can see this burned area here there's just like a skeleton forest left. That is all. And so there's nothing on the ground. There's no grasses or anything left on the ground. It's just open topsoil, which is not good. And then all the forage and the vegetation associated with the tree itself is all gone too. And so I was going to go back and look let me see if I can find some. Yeah. So it's pretty crazy. So these are some pictures from this year. So this is in June in Russia. And so it's pretty crazy. I may post some of these articles and stuff because it gives a really good history of what's going on. But we're definitely not the only people dealing with wildfire right now here in the US or Canada. So there's also a large percentage of other parts of the Northern Hemisphere that are experiencing a lot of wildfire right now as well. And if you guys remember, you may have seen it in the news. It was like 2018, I think. There were some mega wildfires that were occurring in Italy, the south of France, northern Israel, those type of areas as well. That's all Mediterranean climate. So their climate is very similar to what we see here in California. So really hot, dry summers and cool, mild winters, which is a really conducive environment for growing annual grasses. And annual grasses are really, really tough because they provide what we call fine fuel for wildfire. So there's very little ability to get a fire doesn't start slow. If it starts in annual grasses that are dry, it will take off really fast. So that's what's going on. Had anybody ever heard about the fires in Russia at all this summer? A few. Okay, good. You guys are more in tune than I am. So it's just one of those things. Like if, millions of acres of another country are on fire, you would think that would make the news here, but sometimes it doesn't. So, all right. Any other comments about or takeaways about the podcast? All right, well, I am excited to go in and read your responses. So with that, everybody is good with what is due this week, right? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay, so not only with what's due this week, but when it is due as well. Okay, great. All right. So the one last piece of news that I wanted to show you today is an article that just came out from the USDA ARS service in Idaho. And I'm going to post let me copy this into the chat right now for you so you guys have it. But, and then I'll share my screen. All right, so this is kind of an uplifting story about how grazing in general can help contain a wildfire. And in this case, it did it really, really quickly. And so you guys should be seeing this article now. So I'm going to encourage you guys to go in and read through this article. But what ended up happening is that they used targeted grazing last spring in this area to really heavily graze strips of annual grasses that is invasive, and that is in this case is specifically cheatgrass. So we're going to talk a lot about cheatgrass in this class, which is an annual grass that it seeds out when it's mature, and then it regerminates in the early spring. And it is slowly invading, not slowly, it's actually happening pretty quickly. It's invading areas that aren't normally conducive to annual grasses, or doesn't have a lot of annual grasses. So like the Great Basin area, which we're going to talk more about different regions of rangeland in the next couple of weeks. But the Great Basin, kind of think of as Nevada, Utah, southern Idaho, that type of area. So areas that you may want to drive through really, really quickly because it's super boring. It's actually really, really rich with ecology. And so these areas are going to be dominated by sagebrush for the most part. But what ends up happening is they are seeing an incident or a higher incidence of wildfire occurring in these areas as well. And what ends up happening is when a wildfire goes through, it takes out the sagebrush and it takes out the perennial grasses, which are for the most part really good grasses. And what ends up replacing them are this annual grass, cheatgrass. And that gets to be a really hard part of managing the rangeland, because it doesn't have great nutrition. So the animals that are going to utilize it only have a short amount of time to utilize all the energy associated with that plant. And it goes through its life cycle really quickly. So it'll germinate in late spring in these regions. It will grow through its vegetative state into June. And then usually by July, it will grow into its reproductive state, seed out, and die. And so we're really only talking about 3 to 4 months of grass growth in these regions. And so when cheatgrass dies, it turns that golden yellow color like we see a lot of here in California. And the grasses are actually really close together, creating that fine fuel. So cheatgrass is moving in after a fire. It's being opportunistic. Because it's going to utilize resources that the perennial grasses and the sagebrush normally would utilize, but if they're burned out and they die, they can't use it anymore. And so then cheatgrass moves in and it gets established, and the next year it establishes more, and the year after that it establishes more, and it creates a prolonged risk of wildfire. So you can see wildfire occur in that particular area year after year after year sometimes. And so in order to prevent that, these researchers utilized targeted grazing to graze it, cheatgrass infestation in strips. And so they didn't graze a whole area so that there was nothing left. They grazed a certain strips of area, and that really helped remove that fine fuel to create fire breaks, so that it would slow down the intensity of the fire once that fire hit those areas that had been grazed. And they were able to get suppression efforts in on that area, and were able to get around that fire. And so this is just a really cool example of how one of the ways that we can manage animals to actually help increase our ability to fight wildfire. So I'll post this link to this article on Blackboard as well, so you have it. But it's pretty cool. So we're going to talk about different ways that we can actually utilize grazing and different management strategies in certain areas that will benefit the ecology of a rangeland as well. Okay, so my last activity for you guys is I wanted to go into more depth and conversation about the podcast that you guys listened to last week. And so what we're going to do is we're going to split up into breakout rooms. And the big question that I want you guys to discuss, and I'm going to pop around to the breakout rooms, is what was the takeaway? So everybody's going to share what was one takeaway that they came with away from the podcast, and then what is one area that you would like to know more about. All right, so let me put those questions in here. All right, so when you guys get into your breakout rooms, we're going to do 4 of them. Please elect a spokesperson for your room. And what you guys are going to do, and everybody leaves when I get to breakout rooms. It pisses me off. So when you guys get to your breakout rooms, have one person be kind of the leader spokesperson for that room. And then you're going to come back in the last 5 minutes, and we're going to share with the whole class, because the whole point of this is I'm creating a list. Okay. So there's different ways that I can move the curriculum to address the things that you guys are interested in. All right. That's the benefit of having a small class. All right. So here is the question in the chat. Okay, so one takeaway and one area that you would like to know more about. All right, and so I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms for you. And if you guys will go ahead and accept those, I will bounce around as much as possible.
A little bit better. Just reduce the risks of wildfires.
Okay.
And our main takeaways is noticing how different the landscape is now in terms of wildfire occurrences and intensities compared to when indigenous peoples were managing the landscapes. I think that was our biggest takeaway, was comparing what it was then to what it is now and what can possibly change.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, group 1. How about group 2? Big takeaways and what you want to learn.
So some big takeaways was like at this point, it's not if everything's gonna burn, it's when it's all gonna burn. Like it's kind of inevitable that every acre is going to burn at some point, which is really sad. And then another one was like the idea of a forest is like dense, but that creates more fire danger. So the view needs to be changed. And then some things that we want to learn about is how do you implement grazing in strips, like in a forest?
Okay.
And then also what breeds are good at grazing? Like, is there a specific breed
Ooh,
that is better
cool.
at grazing than others? So, and then just rangeland in general, I guess.
Okay, excellent. All right, group 3, big takeaways and what you want to learn.
Okay, I'm pretty sure we were group 3. But what we discussed, we actually didn't talk about what we wanted to learn because we just kind of got consumed in our discussion.
That's okay.
But our takeaway was mainly like we discussed about how like in the podcast she like discusses how like there's different ways to like help in prevention, and like something that I guess we all like observed or like realized in the podcast was that like there's all these different ways, but like no, there's not like people aren't coming together to discuss this. Like people are like, okay, let's do this for a whole range of different rangelands, and that's not how it should work. It should be like make a whole program or plan for all the different rangelands, because I'm pretty sure in the notes in the lecture you discussed like that there's different types of rangelands too. And like each rangeland needs a specific plan. Like you can't just like you do Dr. Diatley said in our discussion like just a blanket for every single type of like rangeland program, because it's not going to benefit and it's not going to actually help in like the prevention of fire. And like people aren't coming together to make these programs, which is like another thing that's like making it worse. Like people are like, oh, if it just do one and that's all, but that's not how it should work.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you. All right, group 4, takeaways and what you want to learn, just real quick. Sorry, I'm keeping you guys over a few minutes. Okay, group 4. Tina, I think that was your group. Do you mind just giving us a rundown?
Yes. So honestly, our group didn't really talk, but my takeaway was that I found something interesting was that I didn't know that Paradise burnt like 13 more times before the whole campfire and everything.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then also I kind of realized that most of the fires that are starting is because like humans, because we are also planting too many trees and stuff. So that was my takeaway from it.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything you are hoping to learn?
I guess just more about how to stop these fires and just keep our environment safer.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for participating. And so what we are going to do is we're going to take this discussion a little bit more in depth in lab on Wednesday. So we're going to meet on Zoom 2 p.m. on Wednesday. And again, please be prepared to kind of interact. We're going to do some breakout rooms, some activities, and some work with like Google Documents and that type of stuff. So, but in the meantime, just please make sure you got it on your calendar that the quiz about rangeland history is due on Friday at the end of day. And that's all I got. I will see you guys on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.